Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here today. It's great to see so many people out here. We've had many questions from the press over these last few days in the award ceremony for Blue Planet Prize, asking us if we have any advice for Japanese NGOs or environmental movement. And we've given various responses, but it's basically what everyone's been telling us is that it's still very young and it's very weak. So it's very good to see many concerned people here today to come out to see these great environmental heroes. I work with the Earth Island Institute on David Brower's activities there, and we have many projects that are active all over the world. One of the projects is the Japan Environmental Exchange, which is here today and has been working to try to bring together Japanese environmentalists with American environmentalists. And I think that's a very important theme for today because I can see in the work that Earth Island does in the U.S. and other places, it's very important that particularly as the Japanese environmental movement is gaining strength, that we be able to lend support and very good examples that perhaps we could hold up to Japanese leaders. We were just talking with Greg Omano about the Glen Canyon Dam, the very large dam in the United States that we are trying to take down. And if we can take that dam down, it would be a very good example for Japanese and dam fighters all over the world to use our arguments and to show us as an example that the U.S. just built so many large dams and helped fund so many large dams all over the world is now turning the other direction, that there's now a new movement going on. And I hope that we will continue to have more examples of things where we can help the Japanese environmental movement, and vice versa, the Japanese can help us to come together because it's a global problem that we face in so many ways, and in many ways we have, even when the problems themselves are not global, like the Niagara River is very local to Japan. We have other rivers, other examples, parallels in the U.S. In the work of Earth Island Institute, our projects find themselves working on problems from pollution from jet skis and two-stroke engines. And there are interesting linkages in that case because many of these are made in Japan, and some companies in Japan have recognized how polluting these motors are, and some have not, and try to stop any progress we've made to ban jet skis, particularly in our national parks and other nature areas. These all, and if you look at the example of protecting marine mammals, fisheries, all these other problems, which we can't say are America's problem or Japan's problem. These are all opportunities for U.S. and Japanese people concerned about the environment to come together to gain strength. For people to come together, because often, as we know, the government we come up against, whether it be Japan or in the U.S., does not respond to science, does not respond to reason, does not respond to the public. And many times it is only after many years that we are successful in having them hear our messages. So one of the things I hope can come out of this gathering today is to strengthen our messages so they'll be more effective in the U.S. and in Japan, because we don't have the time that is often taken in our past battles. The 20 years that Greg Omano mentioned that we have been fighting these. We can't afford that 20 years in so many of our problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mickael. それではですね、引き続きまして、ケネス・ブラザーさんからスピーチしていただきたいと思います。
Thank you. I thought the film was beautiful. He's a high film, wonderful, and the cameraman has a wonderful eye wherever he was, and his compositions were so beautiful. I have a good feeling about this, the outcome in this marsh, or not marsh, but this tidal flat, because well, my father and I have used a quote many times in the books we've done at Friends of the Earth and Sierra Club, and we borrowed it from an American writer and scientist named Lauren Isaac. And it's a simple line. He says, if there's magic on the planet, it's contained in water. And this works in so many ways. We're a water-based life form on this planet. Water is what makes life possible. Carbon too, but it makes so much beauty possible in the world. The canyons it cuts. The canyons my father worked to save. The tidal flat at Isahaya is an example of the kind of magic that happens when water is on a piece of land. And I think that magic can bring life back there if you get rid of the dikes. And I'm doing a book myself on freshwater marsh now in California, where a winemaker named San Sebastian has restored a marsh on his vineyard where he makes his wine. It was once marsh long ago. San Francisco Bay, where I live and where this marsh is, was once much bigger and had tidal wetlands all around it. California has the same area as Japan, about almost exactly, and I would bet that we have spoiled as much wetland in California as you have in Japan. There was once, we have maybe 90%, we've destroyed maybe 90% of the original wetland, both tidal wetlands and freshwater wetlands that we once had in California are now gone. And the place where this man's vineyard was long ago, 120 years ago, was a freshwater marsh. And in this case, and in many cases where marshes have been destroyed, all it takes is water back on the land, and you have marsh again. And this is the magic of water again. This man built a dike so that his water could gather again. And in 1990, he restored his marsh, and now everything is back. All the wildlife is back again in the 8 years since then. And I'm sure it can happen again here. I think that Isahaya wants to be a tidal flat again, and water will make that happen. I think I'll sort of echo what Mickael said about this question we've heard often about what should NGOs do here. And all I can suggest is, having watched my father since he was a little boy, and what he did. Since I was a little boy. The first campaign that made my father famous in the U.S., the one where he sort of invented himself, was the campaign to stop a dam that the Bureau of Reclamation was going to build in Dinosaur National Monument, one of our parks. And my father decided he would fight me. And at that point, nobody did that in the U.S. There was not even a name for the kind of person my father is. When I was a child, my friends would ask me, what does your father do? And I would say, he's a conservationist, which is what environmentalists are called then. And they said, what? And this is not so long ago, the early 1950s, and I had sense enough to be proud of what he did, even though I couldn't explain it to my friends. But he he decided to take on these dam makers. And he's a sophomore dropout from college. He's not an engineer, but he looked at the figures that the dam builders presented the public, and he thought they were wrong. He thought they had made a mistake in their predictions for what this dam would accomplish. And he decided to go back to Washington and testify to that effect. And my mother was scared. She said, her famous line, we always remember, she said, "David, those people have slide rules. They know their mathematics. You must be wrong." But he went back and testified in Congress, and he was right. His figures were better than the dam builders' figures. So there was a lot of talk back then. Don't try to fight City Hall. You can't fight government. You can't fight the Bureau of Reclamation. Too much power. And I think the lesson that my father taught everybody in the environmental movement in the U.S. is you have to fight them. And one person can stop a dam. And there are many examples from our history in the States. One of my father's friends, David Pessin, stopped a nuclear reactor almost by himself in Bodega Bay, a bay near San Francisco. And Rachel Carson, all by herself, really stopped DDT and the bad pesticides that were so rough on bird life everywhere around the world. So I think the lesson is courage, and the lesson is one person can do something about it, and you just have to start fighting them. And government is powerful, but so is the will of people. And in this case, when you're right about a place like Isahaya, the tidal flat there, you have to fight them. And I would just suggest that everybody take courage and fight. That's all I have.
Thank you very much. 引き続きまして、デイビッド・ブラワーさんに話をお願いしたいと思います。Mr. Brower, please. マイク。ありがとうございます。すみませんね、今日はマイクがたくさん使ってるもんですから、なかなか。
Ready for technology. One thing I would like to start thanking is our musicians. I was very much moved by the music today, and I haven't quite got over it. It's extraordinarily good music. And I wish I had a recording of it to take home. I'd also like to introduce someone else in the audience, my former associate and present very good friend, Chris Franklin. Chris had a great deal to do with my having a chance to come here for the prize. And I think that was a good idea. He also had a hand in finding out who would succeed him when he decided to wander off to Alaska because it was farther away. And he was one of the people who found Mickael Davis, who is now following his footsteps and doing very well. The two of these people and I are on the board of directors of the Glen Canyon Institute. They're also going to be helping me spend the money, as will my son Keneth, that we get from this prize, because it all goes to Earth Island Institute for good projects. None of us to the Brower house, but after all, my children are all grown up. Our house is paid for, and my wife is 85, I'm 86. We don't need a great deal of money from here on. And it's going to be very interesting to see what this prize, so generously supplied by Japan, by the Asahi Foundation, what this prize can do one of the things I hope it will do is persuade other people to contribute to this general fund, which Earth Island will administer, and will be called the Brower Fund, but it's not for Brower, it's for whatever these people can dream of. Mickael will be directing it. Other people will be seeing that it's spent wisely, even though I'm one of the people who wants to spend it. So just watch to see what we can do as a result of the inspiration provided by the Asahi Foundation. I'm very proud, pleased about that whole thing. But back to water again. One of the things that is one of our Earth Island projects we call Baikal Watch. I've been to Lake Baikal 4 times in the effort to make it part of the World Heritage. I got the idea that it should be in the World Heritage back in the early 60s. So 30 years later, we succeeded. It is in the World Heritage as of 2 years ago. As those of you must probably know already, it is the largest body of fresh water, liquid fresh water on Earth. It holds 1/5 of the world's liquid fresh water. It has some 1,800 species, indigenous species, and it's the deepest and oldest lake on Earth. And I'm so glad that you're close to it. And I hope you get over there and check it out. It's a wonderful experience. So being concerned about water, I'm also concerned about dams and rivers. And one of the unfortunate records I have is that in the world, all the big dams in the world have been built in my lifetime. I think I had nothing to do with it except that I didn't object in time. But we didn't need those dams. We're learning now quite a bit more about what dams are good for and what they aren't good for. Even the Corps of Army Engineers has learned that. In the state of Florida, they've spent millions of dollars straightening out the Kissimmee River. Now they're spending millions of dollars putting their wiggles back into it because what they've done in the first place is a bad idea. And we're determined to discover and to make the world know that Glen Canyon Dam was a big mistake. We're not going to knock it down. We want to leave the dam there as a bad example. But we're going to put a hole in it. And the Colorado River is going to run through that again. And I'm very anxious not to wait too long because I don't think I'll be around too long. And now I watch the restoration begin, the recovery begin while I'm alive. It'll be easier to watch it that way than later. But I do think, as Mickael said, that if we can take this huge dam and reservoir and drain it and recover the beautiful canyon, some of the most beautiful scenery on Earth was flooded by that reservoir. Restore Glen Canyon itself because it has been badly damaged by that reservoir. Give Mexico a chance to get some of the water it deserves, which we have misused, and give people in the lower states in the United States, California, Arizona, and Nevada, water that is fit to drink, instead of water that is so badly polluted by the existence of that great dam mistake, Glen Canyon Dam. I don't know that 27 million acre feet of water means much to you, but that's how much this dam holds when it is full and when it works. In 1983, they had big trouble. The dam, there was a lot of water. The tunnels of the not canyons, but the restoration facilities, not restoration facilities, what the devil are they? When you let the dam go over the edge, these were faulty. They began to cavitate. They began to erode the foundation itself. The Bureau of Reclamation was splendidly alarmed by that, but not enough. They should have, at that point, said, well, let's start draining it ourselves. If we're going to try to help them persuade, that has to be drained. So we have not only a lot of water wasted, very polluted water, but we have the danger that the dam could collapse anyway. And it would be better to have the water go out under control And to have that dam collapse and cause the collapse of the Grand Canyon Dam down below and all the dams downstream all the way to Mexico. That would be one of the most horrendous economic catastrophes you can imagine. And I think this is one of the places where we can use one of my new arguments. People say it's going to cost a lot of money to do this or to do that. I think we should also ask the question, what is it going to cost if you don't do it right? And that's one of the things I'm hoping will happen, and we'll demonstrate that. That we have the opportunity to do a lot of things right that have not been right. And I think the most important thing I've had to say, thanks to the generosity of the LCD Grass Foundation, is that a huge opportunity now exists to rethink. And we cannot afford not to rethink what we do with our natural resources. The two startling figures that you should go away with, and these come from a bunch of good university people, is that every year, on average, the world takes $33 trillion worth of resources and services from nature. That act makes available something like a $20 trillion global gross national product. There's enormous waste in this. There's the enormous loss of things that cannot be replaced, that need not have been spent in the first place if we, like any good conservative person, would pay back what we borrowed. We borrowed enormously from the earth year after year. And it's my estimate that this last time has already occurred when we can expect the kind of growth all our institutions and governments still think we must have. This is the kind of growth we must no longer have and will no longer have. We think about what kinds of growth must we have and what kinds can we no longer afford. The kinds we can no longer afford are exactly what you saw here happening in Japan, what is happening in the United States, what's happening around the world, and what is happening because of one species on Earth, us. No other species has been destructive of its own environment. We are the only ones. As one of Mickael's friends has pointed out, we must be the youngest species on Earth because everything else seems to know what to do. It is high time we learn what to do. And what to do does not consist of taking the earth apart. We are good at it. No species was ever even thinking about it before, so no species could be better at it than we have been. And we've been just much too good at taking things apart. What we need to do is to reverse all this, to put things back together, to have a new thought about conservation, new thoughts about preservation, new thoughts about restoration, including the realization that restoration can make money. And if you don't think so, check with your automobile mechanic or check with your doctor. They restore either your car or your body. They get well paid, most of them. Too well paid, some of them. But this can happen with restoration. And the earth would like to be restored. So we're just using the initials CPR. Conservation, preservation, restoration. I'd like to see Japan take a lead in this. I'd like to see the United States take a lead in this. I'd like everyone to take a lead in this reversal of human behavior that will give our civilization a chance to be around a little while longer. I'd like to use just 3 numbers, statistics you may or may not believe. But as I give these to you, if you have better numbers, let me know. If you think I'm wrong, let me know. If you think I'm right, you don't have to let me know, just do something about it. One of the figures is that the United States, since World War II, in which I fought in combat in Italy, has used up more resources than all the rest of the world in all previous history. It's a hard number to believe. But if you think we haven't, I would like to ask you to prove it. I argue about this with my son Keneth, but then we argue frequently and beneficially. And occasionally, I find that he's right. It's very embarrassing. And anyway, the other statistic, one of them, came from a meeting in Kyoto, I guess 8 years ago, when David Suzuki, a Canadian, and a Japanese Canadian, and a very good environmentalist there, said that E.O. Wilson, one of the world's top ecologists and certainly experts on ants, have been asked how many people can our world sustain permanently as a fixed population. What's the max? And his answer was a frightening one. He said, if the people have the appetite for resources of the United States and Japan, the number of people the Earth can sustain is just 200 million. In the U.S. and Japan, they're already twice that number. And they're not doing very well, but we're using up everything we possibly can and leaving very little for the rest of the Earth, which is not a good idea if you don't think it's smart to frustrate people, make them mad, make them feel that terrorism is the only escape. Another number comes from Paul Hawken, who wrote the book in the U.S. that should be translated here if it isn't, The Ecology of Commerce. His number, not in that book, but he told it to me orally, was that if we go on using things the way we are, we go on with this kind of civilization that we think is normal, with growth and all that, the world will have to produce as much food in the next 40 years as the entire world has produced for food for the last 8,000 years. That's a scary one. I said, Paul, where did you get that number? He said, I figured it out. And you can figure it out too if you just think, which our institutions are not thinking, either here or in the U.S. What has been happening to our civilization? I'll just make this simple example. Our population and our use of resources have been climbing along at a very gradual rate. And now it's going right up the wall. Exponential growth. Everything that before, when you double again, you got into a lot of trouble. We just finished doubling again. And that's what, and if we go on, there are going to be a lot more doublings. And that's where Paul's figure comes from. And all our institutions think this is just fine, that we can get away with it. And we absolutely cannot. And we're not getting that message through to the government, not even to the environmental movement, certainly not to the corporations, not to the universities, not to the religions. We don't realize what this is doing to the earth, to ourselves right now, and to any chance our children might have to have on earth anything like this one. If you don't believe the numbers, just think about what you've been reading in the press. I just read the figures in our press in the United States that with this 1.2 billion people, China is finding that half of them are not getting enough water. And they're still thinking of using more. Go on to what's happening to the world's fisheries. They're running out. What's happening to the world's forests? When I was in Japan in 1976 with the U.S. Information Agency, visiting 7 cities from Sapporo, Sapporo all the way down to Nagoya. At that point, I learned from the press in Japan, the U.S. speaking press, because my Japanese is pitiful. I want to demonstrate it. No, I won't. But it's, the figure was that the whole world does not contain enough forests at that time, 1976, to provide Japan with what it needs for forest products to carry on its economy. So I took that figure and I asked them all 7 cities. Now, if the population continues going the way it is, and your GNP continues to grow the way it was, which was then 8%, by the time a child born today, and that was 1976, is 21 years old and old enough to vote, you're going to need 30 times as much forest as you now have. And when that child retires, you're going to need 200 times that much forest. And if you don't have enough now, what the hell do you think you're going to use then? And they were polite and said, well, they didn't intend to keep growing at 8%. I said, well, wouldn't it be nice if you stopped while Japan was still beautiful? And if you wonder what has caused the bubble economy, it's that our thinking is a little shaky. I was saying the other night that if you're going to build something, you prefer to build it on rock, not on sand, not on mud, not on frozen water. Rock is good. And all the other things I mentioned aren't very good, but you're not supposed to build anything on bubbles. And that's what we've been doing. We've been building our hopes on bubbles. And bubbles are not that solid. It doesn't do a bit of good to grow and grow and grow if you destroy your home, the earth, in the process of growing. That's what we've done. And that, I think, is the most important message. I came over, having awarded this great prize, I came over here to talk about. Because if Japan can catch this idea and provide the kind of leadership that you provided when you put the United States out of the electronics business and then began to work on Detroit, we began to get some ideas. We can still get some awfully good ideas from Japan. Better ideas that we can get from home unless we shape up. And we're not shaking up very well, certainly not well enough, and neither is Japan. And that's why, among other details in my storied past, I helped get Friends of the Earth started here. It's now in 58 countries. We've got a lot more countries to go. But it's a wonderful experience. It started when we first began to be in just a few other countries and to have international meetings. It's good to have a mix of cultures present. And it gets you over the idea of making careless statements about how good your country is, or any other country, when you have a chance to compare notes with all the countries and find out that you can't even get a good bill of health from the environment. I'm not here to discourage you, I'm here to encourage you. We can do that. I think what the Asahi Foundation has done in putting this kind of award together is an extremely good example of what Japan can do. No other country has done anything like that. And when you go further than that, to realize what you've done with some of your industry is a good example. I had a chance to meet with Mitsubishi Electric. Very good. They've caught on to the ideas. We have just one corporation in the United States that has caught on as well. We ought to spread that information in the corporate world where a lot of the money and power is. We don't have to go on being stupid. I like to play around with the word conservation, which is almost obsolete now because everybody's an environmentalist or hates environmentalists. But back in the old days when we talked about conservation, we didn't talk about it well enough. And I've been just using one little routine constantly. We didn't do it well enough because of economists. One of our fine economists, Hazel Henderson, said economics is a form of brain damage. She's right. But that's not all. It's nice to have some staggering things like that to shake people up. But the other thing we're failing in is an understanding in the marketplace of what the world is worth. Now, I gave you those numbers near the stop, and I'll just add to this that is not just talking about 33 trillion and 20 trillion, but something you can all understand. What is the value of a tree, of a forest? The marketplace will tell you only what it's worth as pulp or as timber. They miss what the forest and the tree is worth in controlling the level of carbon dioxide and making oxygen available, of making soil available, of controlling the quantity and quality of water, of providing habitat for species. Of course, we saw some species are having habitat for species that we're destroying far more rapidly than nature ever did. And the forest is habitat for millions of species, most of which we have yet to discover. So we just go on getting rid of them without knowing what they're good for, even for us or themselves. And then there's a little factor of beauty. I think people in Japan would agree with people everywhere that a forest is a beautiful thing. So here, the marketplace tells us about pulp and about timber, and it misses carbon dioxide. I think we find it useful. It misses oxygen. I use it myself. It misses soil, without which anything we wanted to do on this earth is not going to work. That's wrong. It misses quantity and quality of water. I think you like that too. It misses any consideration for the value of other species, without which we wouldn't make it. And it forgets about beauty. And it calls itself competent. Now, I'd like to see the hands of anybody who thinks that a marketplace that misses all those things is competent. I'll even give time for the translation. Does anybody think a marketplace that does that to one of the most important assets we have is competent? Does it need to be stupid? Can it do something else? No, it doesn't need to be stupid, and it can do something else. And you can help remind the marketplace and all these little lines along the way. Let's give the earth a break, at least until we find another place to live. Thank you.
さてこれからですね、山下さんとデイビッドさんのクロストークということで、山下さんぜひ皆さんの代表としてデイビッドさんにいろんなことを聞いてみてください。10分ほどしかないんですけれども、よろしくお願いいたします。
どうもありがとうございます。3人のお話を聞いていてですね、アメリカも日本も一つも変わらないんだなという気がしております。やはり私も約30年前から干潟のフォーラムでやってるんですけども、たった一人の判断っていうんですか、一人で運動を始めた。それが現在みたいに大きく運動が広がったっていう、そのことも本当同じだなっていうことを感じるんですね。いかがなんでしょうかね。私自身は子供の時の経験が今の運動の原生になってるんですけども、皆さん方どうなんでしょうかね。特にデイさん。
Very careful in my choice of parents, and they both thought very highly of the earth, and I couldn't do anything else, and that's a joke. But I am lucky. My parents cared, and I got a good example in my 4 children care. And I'm encountering a lot of young people now, and the people I've introduced today, that includes Mickael, includes Chris. I think that includes everybody in this room. We care. And I think you started caring early. And if not, then you can do something about making sure that your children have a chance to care early. Because if they get that idea when they're young, they don't lose it. That's my experience. And then I go on to say that it always helps to have at least one consecutive success. It's nice if you can do something and it works, and you win. That encourages you to take a lot of battles and to lose sometimes. And for myself, I don't mind losing. I would rather lose and learn something from it than just wait till I could find something I could win at. And I find not all the environmental organizations will do that. They'll take on the problem if they think they can win. They think it's going to be too hard. They think of something else.
なんていうんですかね、私も子供の頃は今でいうオール1でして小学校6年間大変難しいトップのクラスを走っていた頃でして、学校が大嫌い、ただ生き物が好きだというそのことだけだったんですね。そして小学校を出てからが実は大変素晴らしい若い先生に出会うことができて、その先生のおかげで自分の一生というか、それを目覚めたっていう、もちろん私の父親も私よりか20センチほど背が高くてですね、肩も大きい、素潜り潜水が非常に好きで、10メートル以上潜って3分間息を止めて貝などを取っていた、そういう父親なんで、大変尊敬をして、私自身も潜りをやってですね、アクアラングなんかもやっているんですけども、そういうことが一つの原点になって、ずっとやってきたんです。ただ実際日本だけの特徴かと思ったんですね。こういう自然保護とか、例えば国の政策に反対をするとか、そういうふうなことは非常に日本では難しい。その日本独特のそういうあれかと思ったら、アメリカでも昔はそうだったということを聞いてホッとしてるんですけども、やはり物を言っていく、行動していくということが一番大切だと思うんですね。そういう意味で、先ほどのメッセージもありましたけども、どうも残念ながら日本人っていうのは周囲を見すぎて、自分が正しいと思っていてもその正しいということをなかなか声にして、出さない、あるいは行動を起こさないというですね、そういう昔からの習慣があります。そういう意味でですね、もう一度私たちがですね、21世紀に向けて本当に信念を持って行動ができる、そういうことをもう一度メッセージをお願いしたいと思います。
Well, first I'd like to go back to when you were young, because I had the same experience, but sooner. In the 3rd grade, we had a teacher who came by once a week to give us a lesson in nature study. And I kept hoping she'd be back again soon. I kept counting on that. And I was fascinated by that one teacher. And I remember her name. And I was a lot younger then, in the 3rd grade. 80 years later, I remember her name as Miss Peroni. And she taught me to care about what was happening in nature, and then to go out and look for myself. And it was a lot of fun. And we still had quite a bit of nature when I was growing up. We got rid of a great deal of it. In California, where I was born in Berkeley, I still live in Berkeley, the population in my lifetime has gone up by a factor of 16. Now Japan is better than that. After World War II, you took pretty good care of your population. you haven't taken such good care of your use of resources, nor have we. So that's one of the things we can learn to do together. But I suppose I should think of answering your question. Did I answer that? But I think that I would just say there's one word, it's courage. Just take a chance, work on it. And the other, I just learned, it took me 80 years to learn this one. That it's all right to disagree with someone and welcome the disagreement. But it is not all right to disrespect the person you are disagreeing with. And I think if there's anything I've seen nothing but since I came a week ago to Japan, it is respect for other people. I hope I can take some of that respect home to Berkeley.
本当に第二話なんですけど、日本の環境問題をずっと見てきますと、日本というのは本当に環境問題では後進国だっていうふうに思います。ゴールドマン賞を取って10日間アメリカに滞在したんですけども、行ってみたら恥ずかしいことばかりなんですね。日本人として非常に恥ずかしい、いわゆる国際人として非常に恥ずかしいっていうことをもうつくづく感じたんです。で、ある意味では非常に絶望的な感じで、もう日本の自然環境っていうのは大人たちの手では守れないんじゃないか、将来本当に日本の自然を守り、環境を考える、そして新しい地球を作っていくっていうんですか、そういうことをするのは子どもたちじゃないかっていう気がしてなりません。で、日本で一番問題なのは、今の日本の教育体系が非常に誤っているということと、それから、倫理観がなくを失ってしまっているということじゃないかなと思うんです。で、そういう意味では鎖国300年と言われてますけども、江戸時代は日本人っていうのは素晴らしい科学技術を持っていたし、それから素晴らしい自然に対する考え方を持っていた。そういう意味で私はもう一度江戸時代の先人の人たちの考え方、知恵をですね、学んでいくことが、もしかすると日本が、国際社会の中で環境問題の先進国になれる一つのきっかけになるんじゃないかなというふうな気がしております。残念なことに日本人は自然を捨てた日本人になっちゃった。もう一度回復する、そのチャンスを私たち自身がやっぱり作り上げていかなきゃいけないんじゃないかな。たった一人でもいい、声を上げ続けること、それ以外に打つ手がないんじゃないかと思うんですけど、いかがでしょうかね。
Well, I would like to respond to it, but I'd like to hear some of the younger people respond to that, because what I think is important to me for a while, what they think, what their reactions are, is something quite else. And I'm very interested, and I'd like to show these young people off. My not quite so young son, and Mickael. I had fun with Mickael at a meeting back in Wisconsin not long ago. I don't hear too well. And there's a question from the far back of the room, and I couldn't quite hear it. So I said, Mickael, if I heard that question, what would I say? So he answered. He knows my answers already. What's my answer, Mickael?
One of the things I thought Japanese NGOs can do better is thinking that we're not really qualified in a lot of ways to answer that question, because the culture and history that you draw on in nature preservation is so different. But I just heard Mr. Yamashita refer to 400 years ago this history of nature conservation in Japan, and I think that is a place to start from. Mr. Brower and Mr. Brower here both had success in the U.S. in raising awareness about nature by drawing on our past as lovers of wilderness and lovers of nature, people like Thoreau and John Muir, and they put those into books with pictures of nature. And that was the American cultural history with nature that people could be inspired by. And I think one of the things that Japanese NGOs can do is to fully draw out and educate today's people about the past history of Japanese environmentalism that people may have forgotten when they, as Mr. Yamashita said, abandoned nature. And whatever form you want to take, whether it's books, whether it's through the internet, wherever, that's one place to start to educate people, whether it be the young people or the people in power now, is to draw on your own cultural history of the appreciation of nature, because in every culture, some cultures further back than others, that exist. Because as David Brower points out many times, all of us came from wilderness. None of the genetic material we had, or very, very little of it, evolved in civilization as we know it. It all evolved in the wilderness. Our eyes, our hearing, all come from the wilderness. So in every culture we can go back and find our connection to nature and to wilderness, and that's a place to start, to educate people today to love nature.
Well, this work just more along the same line. You suggest from what you say that you think that a lot of the problem is in the Japanese personality, the way it responds to this issue, which means that it's our job to bring our message, is to change that personality, to bring such a good message we have. We've got to get it to the people, and it seems it's a huge task to change the spirit of a whole society, and to make them believe as we believe. But I guess that's our job.
So isn't it nice to have some young people around to answer questions?
Take care. ありがとうございます。もっとたくさんお聞きしたいんですけど、時間がちょっと迫っていると思います。私もいろんなことからゴールドマン賞を取ったんですけども、ゴールドマン賞っていうのは過去の業績に与えられる賞ではないと。今後運動を続ける、戦い続けている人に対して与えるということなんで、実は私当年にとってまだ64歳です。あと30年現役で頑張るつもりです。どうぞ若い人たち、私の後に続いてください。私の代わりを乗り越えて戦っていただきたい、そういうふうに思います。どうもありがとうございました。
それではですね、この地球のヒーロートークの最後にデイビッド・ブラザーさんから一言だけ日本の若者、そして若者だけじゃなくてですね、環境保護のためにいろいろ頑張っていらっしゃる方にメッセージをいただけますか。
Well, it is really a little bit silly to come to a country that you have only been in 8 times and then only briefly, and to tell them what to do. Over in the United States, when young people ask me, well, I'm interested in what you're doing, what should I do? My standard answer is, get out of the country. Go somewhere else in the world, preferably to a third world country, and listen. Don't go there to show what a big shot you are as an American. Go there to listen. And listen for a while. And if you happen to be listening for something like 6 months in a third world country, come back and tell us what you learned that we either never learned or forgotten. And that to me is one of the most promising things to me. And I just say that because I believe it, and not just because I'm in Japan. At my advanced age of 86, first I like to brag about it because I never thought I'd get that far. The other thing I like to do is that wish I could lie about my age, but I don't try to do that. But the main thing is to recognize the beauty and the diversity of the cultures on this earth, the extended family we all share. And it is very exciting, especially when you start at my age, looking at the young children from any other part of the world. It's just excitement all over again. Look at the promise. Look what's there. Look what this child knows already. Look what it learned from wilderness. Look what it learned from his parents, from this earth. Just keep at it and give each new child the break that child believes. Don't let anyone continue to trash the earth that they're going to depend upon. And they're going to depend upon it more than you do. Because before they get as old as you are, we'll have probably used up another $33 trillion worth of goods and services every year on the way to they're getting to be that old. And don't tolerate that anymore. That's one of the things that you can do. I like to say this to everybody that I talk to wherever I may be. There is no one in this audience who can't make a difference in what happens from this day on to the earth, to you, to your children, or to the children of people you love. You can do that. The singer John Denver, whom I knew quite well, would like to say, I can do that. And so can you.
どうもありがとうございました。Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. そして山下さんも本当にどうもありがとうございました。それでは皆さん。皆さんもう一度温かな拍手でお送りください。ありがとうございました。